Today I'm finding out how fit I really am. I'm here at the Center for Sports Medicine in Münster, near my hometown in Germany, to test my VO2max under laboratory conditions. But what does this value actually tell us, and how accurate are the measurements of sports watches, fitness trackers and smartwatches? In today's video I'll try to explain VO2max in a way that's easy to understand. I'll show you how it's tested in the lab, we'll take a look at my results, and then we'll also check how accurate sports watches and smartwatches really are. Because now I finally have some valid comparison values. After my lab test, I also had an in-depth conversation with Dr. Greiving from the Center for Sports Medicine, and I'll show you a few excerpts from that as well, translated to English of course. So there was definitely a lot to talk about today, so let's not waste any more time and just get started right away. Have fun! VO2max. At first it sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's the maximum amount of oxygen your body can absorb and utilize during exercise. This maximum oxygen amount is measured in milliliters and then put into relation with the time in minutes and your body weight in kilograms. That gives us the unit milliliters per minute per kilogram. So VO2max is a relative value. Specifically, it's an indicator of your aerobic fitness. And here is something you should know. During training, there is an aerobic phase and an anaerobic phase. Aerobic literally means with oxygen. In this phase, your body mainly uses oxygen from breathing to burn fat and carbohydrates in order to generate energy. This is efficient and sustainable, meaning you could theoretically keep up aerobic training for a long time. Typical examples are jogging and cycling. But if you increase the intensity, at some point oxygen is no longer enough to provide all the energy you need. Your body then switches and starts producing additional energy without oxygen. That's when we enter the anaerobic phase. Anaerobic simply means without oxygen. This type of energy production is fast but less efficient. You can't sustain it for long. Typical examples are sprints, explosive jumps or heavy lifting. VO2max, as mentioned, is an indicator of your aerobic fitness, so it tells us the maximum intensity at which your body can still mainly work aerobically. If you go beyond this threshold, your body can no longer cover its energy demands solely with oxygen and starts using the anaerobic metabolism. But what are typical VO2max values? There are many different figures depending on the source. The Academy for Sports and Health in Germany lists average values of 35 milliliters per minute per kilogram for women and 40 for men. Endurance athletes, according to this source, are typically in the range of 60 to 80. In general, the value depends not only on gender, but also heavily on age. Many sources, such as Runner's World, therefore provide ranges for different age groups. For my age group, 25 to 29, the average VO2max is between 43 and 48. Garmin also has a table with values for different age groups. Dr. Greiving says the following about this.
Wenn ein Mann normal sportlich ist, dann ist er irgendwo zwischen 30 und 50. Ein normaler Mensch bewegt sich viel im Alltag, auf dem Bauernhof, wo auch immer, liegen meistens so um die 25, eher 30, 35 Milliliter würde ich so schätzen. Okay. Bei den Frauen immer minimal weniger, aber auch nicht so viel, das ist mal 10%, da liegen die so bei 32, 33. Ne?
But you can't simply say that a higher VO2max means better athletic performance, because as I said, it's just an indicator of your aerobic fitness, not your anaerobic fitness. Professional cyclists or long-distance runners often reach VO2max values of 70 to 85. The highest VO2max ever measured was recorded by the Norwegian cyclist Oskar Svensson, 97.5. That's incredible, of course. Usain Bolt, on the other hand, in his prime reportedly only had a VO2max of 50 to 60 according to different sources. Does that mean he's less fit or less of a high-performance athlete? Of course not. I think most of us would agree that Usain Bolt is the definition of an elite athlete. As a sprinter, his training simply focuses less on aerobic and more on anaerobic capacity. It's all about short, intense, explosive efforts. Endurance athletes, however, train almost exclusively to maximize oxygen utilization, since they need to sustain their effort for much longer periods. Sprinters also need a lot of explosive power, which is why they tend to be much more muscular than endurance athletes. Larger muscle fibers are not optimal for maximum oxygen uptake. That's why endurance athletes are usually very lean with less muscle mass and low body fat. In soccer, for example, both aerobic and anaerobic fitness are very important. A match lasts 90 minutes but also includes frequent, short, intense sprints. That's why professional soccer players typically have significantly lower VO2max values than marathon runners or cyclists, usually somewhere between 50 and 60. If soccer players had VO2max values like professional cyclists, this would in many cases be associated with less body weight, less muscle mass, or an extreme focus on endurance, which in turn could lead to less explosiveness or less strength in physical duels. So when it comes to VO2max, you really can't speak about good or bad values. Personally, when it comes to sports, I would also describe myself mainly as a soccer player. I'm nowhere near professional level, but I still have 4 soccer sessions per week, including a match. According to my Garmin watch, my VO2max is currently at 53, which falls into the excellent category. High time to check that properly in the lab. So how exactly is the VO2max value measured? Sports watches like these two here can only estimate your VO2max. It does this by analyzing your endurance workouts primarily based on your heart rate. We'll take a closer look at how accurate that is in a moment. In the lab, however, VO2max can be measured very precisely with a mask which allows for an exact analysis of how much oxygen you inhale and how much you exhale. In addition to the mask, I also had ECG electrodes attached to my body, and as a backup I wore a chest strap to record heart rate. The test itself works like this. On a treadmill you start at 6 km per hour, which is 3.7 miles per hour, so basically just fast walking. Every 3 minutes the speed is increased by 2 km per hour or 1.25 miles per hour. But before each stage you briefly step off the treadmill for a few seconds to have blood taken from your earlobe. This is used to measure lactate values. I'll also make a separate video about lactate and the lactate threshold, so stay tuned for that. This little break only lasts about 10 seconds, then it's back onto the treadmill. 8 km per hour, 3 minutes. Another short break, blood sample, then 10 km per hour, and so on. You keep going until you can't anymore. 12 km per hour corresponds to a running pace of 5 minutes per kilometer, meaning you would run 10 kilometers in 50 minutes. In America, this would be roughly 7.5 miles per hour. My usual pace is about 4:45 per kilometer. At the next stage of 14 km per hour, that's 4:17 per kilometer, we're already quite a bit faster. I was able to manage those 3 minutes, and then 16 km per hour or 3:45 per kilometer was definitely tough, but I also got through that. With just another 10-second break, the treadmill then jumped to 18 km per hour or 11.2 miles per hour, which equals a pace of 3:20 per kilometer or 5:22 per mile. Over 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles, that would be a time of just over 33 minutes, something I'm honestly far from achieving. But I managed to hang in there and hold the speed for 3 minutes. That was definitely my limit though. I couldn't take on 20 km per hour anymore and the test was over. It's really important in this test to push yourself to your limits, but at some point the VO2max naturally reaches a kind of plateau where it doesn't increase further despite increasing the intensity. We'll see that in the results that I share in just a bit. For me it was time for some recovery now, while Dr. Greiving analyzed the test results. Afterwards we went through them together. Now let's put the facts on the table. My VO2max, according to the lab, is 52. My absolute maximum oxygen uptake is 4.24 liters per minute, that's 4,240 milliliters per minute. As mentioned, VO2max is usually given relative to body weight in milliliters per minute per kilogram, and my weight was checked before the test as well at 82.2 kilograms, so dividing 4,240 milliliters per minute by 82.2 kilograms gives us about 52. Looking at the blue curve in this diagram, you can clearly see how this value was reached during the test. The y-axis shows absolute oxygen uptake in liters per minute, while the x-axis is simply the time. Since the intensity increased step by step, so did my oxygen uptake. The blue curve rises steadily until near the end we see it flattening into a plateau. As I mentioned earlier, this is the point where oxygen uptake no longer increases despite higher load. That's when VO2max, the maximum oxygen capacity, is reached. So during a lab test you really need to push to your limits because the plateau only shows up near the end. But there would be no point in forcing myself through another stage when my maximum had already been reached. And to be fair, I wouldn't have lasted the full 3 minutes at 20 km per hour anyway.
Hier am Schluss der Belastung hast du schon ein Plateau. Das heißt, die letzten 3 Minuten ist eigentlich nichts mehr passiert. Das heißt, du bist immer eigentlich unter 50 geblieben. Du bist so 50, 51, 52. Und wenn das jetzt noch gegangen wäre, wäre das hier noch weiter hochgegangen. Ist es aber nicht. Das Einzige, was hochgegangen ist, ist noch die CO2-Abgabe.
With a VO2max between 50 and 55, the results were more or less what I expected beforehand. Like I said, I would describe myself mainly as a soccer player, and I also do strength training in the gym like 3 to 4 times per week, with a focus on sprint and explosive strength, so a lot on the anaerobic side and not the aerobic fitness. And with 52, I would say my VO2max as an indicator for aerobic fitness is fine.
Du bist immer noch mehr ein Fußballer als ein Langstreckler, weil du gehst vom Laktatwert sehr hoch. Das heißt, du hast der Anteil an schnellkräftigen Muskelfasern ist noch relativ hoch, weil die bilden vor allem das Laktat.
So that's the lab's verdict. Over the last couple of years I tested countless sports watches, fitness trackers and smartwatches. How do they estimate my VO2max? As mentioned earlier, Garmin gives me 53. Coros hits the value spot on with 52 and Suunto is very close as well with 51.3. Even standard smartwatches like the Apple Watch or the Amazfit Balance 2 estimate very well with 51. Only the new Samsung Galaxy Watch 8 was a little off at 47.5, but to be fair, I've only been wearing it for a few weeks since it was released. Overall, I was honestly surprised at how accurate the watch estimates were compared to the lab results. According to Dr. Greiving though, this is not always the case.
Dann ist Garmin mit seinen 53er tatsächlich.
Für dich, in deinem Fall, ist es gut. Wir haben allerdings auch Abweichungen, wo wir bis zu 10 Milliliter.
Ja, klar.
Das ist, aber bei dir passt es sehr, sehr gut.
Now from theory to practice. How can we use the VO2max value and how can we improve it? The simplest way to increase your VO2max is through weight loss. My value of 51.6 comes from dividing 4,240 milliliters per minute by 82.2 kilograms. If I lost 5 kilograms and weighed 77 kilograms while maintaining the same performance, my VO2max would go up to 55. With another 5 kilograms less, it would be close to 59. This is because with less weight, I would run more efficiently and need less energy per kilometer. My effective oxygen uptake, VO2max, would therefore be higher. But of course, it's not that simple. If I lost weight, I might also lose muscle mass, which could hurt my sprinting ability or explosiveness, something that would be counterproductive for soccer. So maybe my goal should be to lose a little bit of fat without losing muscle mass or strength. And how exactly you can do that is something I will share in a future video, so make sure to subscribe to this channel to not miss this and many more things coming. Before the test, my body composition was also measured using electrodes and my body fat percentage came out at 16.7%. That's perfectly healthy, but with some room for improvement, which could further increase my VO2max. If someone is overweight, losing weight can drastically improve VO2max very quickly. My muscle mass was measured at 34.29 kilograms, which is above average for my BMI, especially in the legs, again showing that my training focus is more on anaerobic performance. In general, you can increase VO2max primarily through endurance training, for example tempo runs or cycling. Interval training is especially effective where you do short, very intense intervals just above or below your VO2max threshold.
Bei dir würde es nur mit einem Verfahren gehen, wie man dich besser kriegt. Also wie man deine VO2max noch steigern könnte. Und das wäre nur mit Intervallen, nur mit Tempoeinheiten, nur mit Knallen. Ja, das heißt, Grundlagentraining würde bei dir sehr wahrscheinlich keine große, selbst wenn du jetzt auf eine wöchentliche Kilometerleistung von 150 Kilometer gehen würdest, würde sehr wahrscheinlich bei der VO2max relativ wenig passieren. Vielleicht über den Gewichtsverlust ein bisschen, aber es wird nicht so extrem sein. Da braucht man wirklich die hohen Belastungen, da braucht man auch die strukturellen Anpassungen, was Herz und so weiter angeht. Ne? Und das wären Intervalle.
For instance, you could do 4 times 4 minutes at 90 to 95% of maximum heart rate with 3-minute breaks in between. How to use such heart rate zones for different training goals is something we will also cover in a future video, because these zones and individual thresholds were also determined in this lab test. In any case, VO2max can definitely be improved with regular training. Healthy nutrition and good sleep are also crucial, and ultimately genetics play an important role as well, for example the heart size and lung volume. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope I was able to explain the very important but often misunderstood concept of VO2max in a clear way and shed some light on it. For me personally, it was super exciting to actually test it in the lab and discuss all my data and results with Dr. Greiving. By the way, the test didn't just determine my VO2max, but also my individual heart rate zones, lactate values and lactate threshold. As I mentioned, blood was taken after every treadmill stage. What all that means and how we can use, for example, the lactate threshold to train more effectively, I'll show you in an upcoming video. So again, don't forget to subscribe. To really dive into VO2max, I want to focus solely on this metric in this video. If you still have any questions concerning the VO2max, the lab test, the results or anything, just leave a comment down below or contact me directly via Instagram. If you found this video helpful or interesting, you could really support me by giving this video a quick thumbs up. But for now, thanks a lot for watching and see you in the next one.